matter. I wanted to sensitize people that when we are talking of cults, Mr. Speaker, whether you want to put a blanket on them and call them religious institutions and try to tie them to the church, Mr. Speaker, it is obvious, it is in the public domain that any person who actually pushes other people to kill themselves or pushes other people to have extreme activities within a social movement is a cult, Mr. Speaker. I want to say that Article 32 of our Constitution actually states that every person has the right to freedom of religion, thought, belief, and opinion, Mr. Speaker. But every right also, you cannot stand up and say you have the freedom and of belief and religion, yet actually what you're hiding behind is acts of terrorism, Mr. Speaker. And so therefore, when we are looking at this case, and for me, Mr. Speaker, I actually push that we have a commission of inquiry, because this is an act of terrorism. This is a situation where we have actually had a terrorist sitting in a county somewhere, recruiting people into terrorist activities, and therefore it must be dealt with as an act of terrorism, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it also states in our Constitution that the state shall take legislative policy and other measures, including setting standards to ensure that all rights are protected, Mr. Speaker. And so, on this particular matter, what the state should do and continue to do is ensure that the right to life is protected, Mr. Speaker.
Point
this
up,
is...
Senator Gloria, your time is up. Point up. Resume your seat, Senator. Resume your seat, Senator Gloria. Senator Hamida, you've got your 5 minutes running now.
She was doing definitions.
Asa. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Order, Senator Gloria.
Asante Bwana Speaker. Ya kwangu tu ni kukemea na kuna masikitiko makubwa sana kwa watu wa Kilifi na wa Kenya kwa jumla, kuwa ni watu wengi sana tunaona walikwenda na ni miaka mingi imechukua. Bwana Speaker, hii ni kuanzia mwaka 2017. Na naambiwa hapa ni 203, kuwa haya yote yalikuwa yakitendeka nchi yetu tukiwa sote tuko hapa. Nchi ilikuwa iko kwenye county, iko na governor na wenye nitasema kwenye county wenyewe hatukuweza kujua kuwa watu wetu, familia yetu, ndugu zetu walikuwa wakienda kwenye huo msitu. Huo msitu umekula watu wengi, bwana mwenyekiti. Ningeomba sana kuwa uchunguzi ufanywe kwa haraka, na mtu mwenyewe yeye Pastor Mackenzie nafikiria kwa sasa yuko, na tumeona kuwa Pastor Mackenzie alikuwa ameshikwa kabla na alitolewa tu fine ya 10,000 peke yake, na kusema kweli mpaka na yale yote alikuwa amefanya, lakini fine ilikuwa ni 10,000. Kwa hivyo tunaomba kuwa hiyo iweze kuchunguzwa kwa haraka na tuweze kuona matokeo ya watu. Lakini bwana mwenye Speaker, nashindwa kuwa hao watu wote wamefariki na watu na familia zao watu wameumia. Kwa hivyo sijui ni compensation gani tunaweza kufanya kwa hao watu kuweza kuangaliwa. Na la pili bwana Speaker ni kuwa tutaweza kumonitor vipi, kwa sababu hii kama wanaita cult, kusema kweli siwezi kujua kwa Kiswahili, haiko kwa mtu mmoja tu, sio kwa Pastor Mackenzie, imekwenda mahali pengi. Pastor Mackenzie pia ameonekana pia ni mtu anajulikaniwa kwa sababu ameonekaniwa na rais wa Kenya wakiwa wakiomba pamoja, na ni masikitiko makubwa. Nataka kujua ni kweli ama si kweli. Kwa hivyo bwana Speaker, kwa mtu mwenyewe kwa Pastor Mackenzie Kwa Pastor Mackenzie, kwa yeye kujulikaniwa ni kuwa
Senator Boni, what's your point of order? Resume your seat, Senator Hamida.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Gloria.
105.
I have granted Senator Boni to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again on standing order number 105. But this is bigger than 105. The senator is not only contravening standing order number 105, but is also attempting to drag the name of the head of state into a national calamity. Mr. Speaker, something that borders on terrorism stroke apocalypse. Mr. Speaker, if the intention of the young, not the young, if the intention of the new senator is to discuss the president, these standing orders allow you. These standing orders, my sister, I'm helping you. These standing orders allow you to discuss the president. You can bring a substantive motion. But to disparage the name of the head of state, even if he is your opponent, even if he is not your presidential candidate, who was not your presidential candidate of choice, that is not the route to go. Imagine yourself, if it was your husband being named to be associated with Mackenzie. Where would that leave
Order
you?
members,
Mr. Speaker,
order members. Order members.
Mr. Speaker,
Order members.
Mr. Speaker,
go on,
I therefore,
Senator
Mr. Speaker, request that the senator be forced to withdraw and apologize. And Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of national unity, we can still debate the demerits of the head of state with decorum.
Allow him.
We are killing, Mr. Speaker, we are killing our own Senate, the same one that you keep on lying and saying that it is the upper house.
You've made your point. You've made your point, Senator Boni.
Mr. Speaker,
You've made your
Mr.
point.
Speaker, again I want to help the young senator
Boni, you have
from
made your
Nairobi.
Point. You've made your point.
Mr. Speaker,
resume your seat.
this is important.
Resume
I
your
also,
seat. I have. Resume your seat. Senator Hamida. Senator Hamida, I want to invite you to the provisions of that standing order 05 so that you either substantiate and or apologize for that statement.
Bwana Speaker, mimi hata wakunipa nafasi ya kusema vile nilikuwa nataka kusema. Mimi ile nilikuwa nasema kuwa Bwana Mackenzie ameonekaniwa tu akiwa wala hata sikusema zaidi hapo. Nimesema ameonekaniwa wakiomba pamoja. Hiyo tu ndio nimesema. Sijasema kitu. Kwa hivyo bwana mwenyekiti, ningeshtumu mimi nimesema tu wamekuwa kanisani pamoja. Hiyo tu ndio nimesema, na kama peke yake nimesema, na kuna ubaya ya wao kuwa kanisani pamoja. Yeye ni pastor.
Order members.
Bwana Speaker, yeye kabla watu hawajajua ni kazi gani anafanya, yeye already alikuwa ni pastor na alikuwa anaombea watu. Kwa hivyo ameonekaniwa na watu wengi Bwana Speaker, naomba uweze tafadhali nimalize, na naomba niongezewe dakika moja. Bwana mwenyekiti, Bwana Speaker, kwa hivyo naomba kuwe na uchunguzi wa haraka. Bwana Speaker, naomba wakubwa wa makanisa na
Senator Hamida, your time is up. Senator Veronica. Resume your seat, Senator Hamida.
Mr. Speaker, sir, would you protect me, Mr. Speaker,
Order members,
sir?
order members. Senator Veronica, proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to debate this motion, which brings a very sad day to the nation of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, to watch such a horrendous action, Mr. Speaker, from one Mackenzie, Mr. Speaker, who I would never dignify with the title called pastor, Mr. Speaker. We need to come to a very simple conclusion, Mr. Speaker, that Mackenzie operated and acted on his own motion, Mr. Speaker, not guided by any form of religion, Mr. Speaker, but driven by evil scheme, occultism, Mr. Speaker, cultic behavior, Mr. Speaker, that lured very innocent victims who are gullible to his den, Mr. Speaker, where he persuaded them to fast until their death, Mr. Speaker. What has shocked me, Mr. Speaker, in such a serious motion, Mr. Speaker, where we are not even supposed to even define or even see indications of where any senator, which political side of divide any senator belongs to, Mr. Speaker, I have watched the same today, this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, being politicized to the point where my honorable colleague, Senator Hamida, has mentioned the name of the head of state. Mr. Speaker, let me say this, Mr. Speaker, before I even proceed. It is the saddest moment, Mr. Speaker, that we would want to trivial an event that amounts to a massacre, Mr. Speaker, to a point of even saying that they have been in charge with anybody, as though that proves anything, without any substantiation. You will keep quiet. I finish what I am submitting before this House, and you will respect my time. Respect my time, please. You will keep quiet until I finish.
Order members.
Mr. Speaker,
allow the senator to be heard in silence.
let me say this, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed.
The honourable senator,
order members, Senator Eddie,
the
order,
honourable
please.
senator
Order,
did not offer any evidence before the floor of this House to prove that he had been in charge with anybody. And let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker, not that it would have made any difference if he went to any church with anybody, including with Senator Sifuna or Senator Hamida. The point is, it would not have reduced the magnitude of the massacre that has happened in Kilifi, Mr. Speaker. And I hope when, Mr. Speaker, we retreat from today's debate, Senator Madzayo, who is deeply affected, this being a massacre that has happened in his county, will sit down his political side of the divide, Mr. Speaker, and talk to them about taking issues more seriously, especially when they are touching on lives and loss of lives of many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the tragic incidents, Mr. Speaker, has caused loss of life, Mr. Speaker. It is shocking, Mr. Speaker, that as a society, Mr. Speaker, there was no detection and lives were lost, Mr. Speaker. I have asked myself many questions, Mr. Speaker. Was there no community, Mr. Speaker, around Shakahola village in Kilifi County? Was there no chief? Was there no security intelligence to detect? Mr. Speaker, how does one person die, the 6th person, the 10th person, the 80th person, Mr. Speaker? Is this the kind of society that we have nurtured for our generations and for ourselves, Mr. Speaker? I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. Criminal activity is criminal activity. Mackenzie, Mr. Speaker, has entered into a different realm that cannot be called religion, Mr. Speaker. He has traversed, Mr. Speaker, into egregious violations of human rights, Mr. Speaker. If his case has to be handled, Mr. Speaker, then it has to be handled with the seriousness that it deserves, Mr. Speaker, and we sympathize with the hearts and the hearts and the families of all the victims, Mr. Speaker, who have lost their lives in Kilifi. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, the church which has been conducting its affairs within its spiritual mandate and legal mandate, Mr. Speaker, must not now be put to defense on account of Mackenzie's evil schemes and criminal activity, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
I wish to be
Honorable
informed.
members. Senator Veronica, Senator, resume your seat, Senator Veronica. Senator Veronica, take your seat. Honorable members, this is a very serious motion that we are discussing. Let us be sober for one moment. This is a serious motion. Senator Mandago. I had remember members, I had indicated there were 5 senators who had submitted statements and had been approved. Senator Mandago is among the 5 and is the last one in that list. I will thereafter follow the system of those who've requested to speak to it.
And my 5 minutes starts now. Mr. Speaker, first I rise in support of this motion on the matter, this critical matter in Kilifi County. Mr. Speaker, it is quite unfortunate that such activity of such magnitude that has resulted in deaths. As we speak today, the count is at 73, and we don't know how many more will be 89, Mr. Speaker. The most astonishing thing, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that in this country, more than 89 people can die, be buried, without any alarm from any quarter of the security, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm also wondering, the families of those who are affected, whether they also reported the same matter of disappearance of their kins, Mr. Speaker, to any security agents. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious matter. And Mr. Speaker, this House, and it is time as Parliament, as Senate, Mr. Speaker, we come up with legislation to prohibit cults and even regulate religious activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you remember in the past, we had another church called Finger of God. And you know what happened to one of our beautiful, bright news anchor who was duped into that. Her career was destroyed. Our family was destroyed. They even lost a child, Mr. Speaker. And if we continue shying away from doing what we are supposed to do as legislators, that we cannot regulate religion, Mr. Speaker, it is time. If we can lose up to 89 people, and there are more investigations going on, and we are not aware of how many other cultic activities are happening around the country, Mr. Speaker, there is need for legislation to prohibit. Mr. Speaker, a country like Rwanda passed a legislation to require anybody starting a church must have some qualification in theology, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we cannot have people waking up today, he's an apostle, before you discover he's a reverend, before long he's a bishop, he's archbishop, and shortly you discover he has become the Jesus of Tongaren, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if we continue allowing this, it is going to form a precedent. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, where was the NIS? Where was the County Security Committee team? And Mr. Speaker, when you look at the period, most of the people who are buried, Mr. Speaker, it was after the Jubilee administration governed by the handshake, and I think the NIS and the security were busy gerrymandering with politics, and they forgot a very important function of making sure citizens of this country are safe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is not proper that our agencies, who are galloping a lot of resources in this country, that such act can happen without them noticing or even reporting. Unless, Mr. Speaker, the County Security Committee in Kilifi was part and parcel of this process. I request, Mr. Speaker, that the County Security Committee must be investigated, Mr. Speaker, for sleeping on the job, and proper action must be taken. And Senator, the Honorable Senator for Kilifi, I must say I'm also surprised that our whole 89 people can die in your county and you are not aware, and even the county government is not aware. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support the motion.
Yes. Thank you, Senator Mandago. Honorable Senator Manzo Daniel Kitonga.
Mr. Speaker, not everybody who says, Lord, Lord, shall make to the kingdom of heaven. And only those who do what God commands has that chance. And it is very clear the biggest commandment is to love others as you love yourself, to love God and to love others as you love yourself. And again, in the last days, there will be many false prophets. And these false prophets shall be known by their product. The product of Pastor and Prophet Mackenzie is now known that it is death. Mr. Speaker, the activities which has taken place in Kilifi, a lot of them are of criminal nature and have to be investigated thoroughly. In fact, I really want to agree with Honorable Mandago that the NSIS should have picked this many, many years ago, relay that information to the security agencies, and those activities whereby many people have been found dead would have been stopped a long time ago. Mr. Speaker, I want to state that these activities can affect any one of us here, our relatives, our children, and if it is allowed to go on either in this church or in any other church in any part of the country or in any part of the world, I'm sure it offends even international law. And for that matter, Mr. Speaker, this particular incident must be investigated very, very closely. Mr. Speaker, it is not the only church which has such activities. And in fact, we have to go back to the old debate, and using that measure I have given, which was given by Jesus Christ himself, then it shall be determined by the products or by the outcome of the activities of such preachers, Mr. Speaker. The biggest commandment is the commandment of love. At the moment one doesn't measure to that, then obviously, Mr. Speaker, the agencies in this country must take action. What has happened, Mr. Speaker, we demand information as to the outcome of postmortems which will be conducted in these bodies. Has somebody's skull been crushed? Has somebody just starved to death? Or has any other method been used to kill or to commit atrocity against these particular people? Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of information which has come out from the people who know this pastor, from the people who live in Kilifi, that in fact a lot of cash movement was there. People will sell whatever they have so that they could follow this movement, and also so that they could reach everlasting life, which everybody aspires to. And in the process, some of them will starve themselves to death, and others, when they attempt to escape, Mr. Speaker, from the information I have, will then be revisited upon. Mr. Speaker, the person who released this information went through this forest, this massive land, to another corner and found themselves into a place they could give information and investigations could begin. I want also to inform the House that the information I have is that Pastor Mackenzie surrendered himself to police when he heard there were issues. And that's why Senator Amida, as a lawyer, will tell you, the police are allowed by the law to release anybody on, so long as they can be traced, or on bond, even police bond. And this pastor was released on bond. I'm told during the investigations, he's also making demands to police. He claims that he must be left alone at the back of the police car, the Land Cruiser. And sure enough, he's been complying and allowing investigations to take place. But Mr. Speaker, we have a lesson to learn here, even as politicians. We should not trust everybody who even invites us to Arambis or for prayers, Mr. Speaker. And unfortunately, this pastor has been, together with other pastors, visiting the head of state during the campaign and even purporting to pray for him. Yet behind the scenes, he's committing atrocities, he's misleading Kenyans, and therefore anybody is gullible to such people. Now that it is claimed that religion is the opium of the people. We have to be careful with the religion. We have only to test every religion, Mr. Speaker, with the test we were given by Jesus Christ to see them by their outcome, and whether whatever they do results into breaking the law of God With the biggest law is law of love, and the other one is to follow the commandments of God. Whoever follows the commandments of God will not commit murder, which is one of the commandments. I raise my case, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Senator Cherargei Samson Kiprotich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my heart and empathies and sympathies goes to the families and friends who have lost more than 89 Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, looks like a movie of genocide in the famous Hotel Rwanda, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's very sad that religion, as Karl Marx has said, is the opium of the masses and the poor, as my brother has alluded to. It's very sad, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I propose the following to the government, that, Mr. Speaker, the issue of mental illness is a very serious issue. Depression, and you even saw the case of Kitengela that is trending and what happened in Kitengela, Mr. Speaker. So we did debate the mental health bill last session, Mr. Speaker, and therefore these families and many Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, are undergoing through mental issues, Mr. Speaker, that should be looked at. So, Speaker, I propose that government should immediately, through the Ministry of Interior and Coordination, and also Attorney General's office, to vet afresh, Mr. Speaker, and look at the registration of religious organizations in the country, be it Christian, Hinduism, Muslim, Mr. Speaker. I think there is a misnomer in this country, Mr. Speaker, where we are only keen against the Muslim community because there is a perception that there is radicalization, Mr. Speaker. Though, Mr. Speaker, these are shown that we should look at both ways. Even within Christianity, there is radicalization that is going through, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, vetting and registration of religious organizations must be done, Mr. Speaker. We are aware that the right to religion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everybody has a right to worship, but the Constitution provides that where your right starts is where my right ends, Mr. Speaker. Even as we go through investigation, we want to ask all of us to refrain from commenting, Mr. Speaker, because it's sometimes prejudicial. I have seen the DPP, DCI minister going there, Mr. Speaker, but we need to be given forensic information, Mr. Speaker, on post-mortem, that really what happens, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue of cultic religion is very sad, Mr. Speaker. I've heard my friends alluding that in one or so, on several or some occasions, that the pastor, the infamous Pastor Mackenzie, was in the same congregation with the president, Mr. Speaker. Those are just illusions. Those are just statements, Mr. Speaker, that has been made for political expediency, Mr. Speaker. We are aware, and I want to urge minority side, Mr. Speaker, not to trivialize some of this matter, not to do it for political capital or expediency that we are seeing today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the President of the Republic of Kenya is a truthful man.